How's it going, guys? Today I've got 3 really interesting upgrades or developments, whatever you want to call them, that you're probably going to be seeing soon in Wi-Fi. And I would consider these pretty major. I'm not going to leave you hanging, I'm just going to tell you what these are right off the bat. Then we can get into the detail. The first one is called WiFi HaLow, and it basically allows for much longer range for IoT devices. The second development is called EasyMesh, which makes it a lot easier to have mesh networks. You might know those. And the third one is Wi-Fi 7. Yes, we've barely even rolled out Wi-Fi 6 yet, but they're already working on Wi-Fi 7, and it could come relatively soon. The first thing I'm going to talk about is Wi-Fi HaLow. It's actually spelled HALOW, and it's just the name for a new sub-1 GHz spectrum for Wi-Fi. As you know, we already have 2.4 and 5 GHz. There's the upcoming 6 to 7 GHz, and now there will also be a lower 1 GHz. This will be aimed mainly at IoT devices, so it's not for big, heavy bandwidth main computers or phones and things like that. More like smart home devices, or really anything you consider part of the Internet of Things. This stuff really doesn't require a lot of bandwidth, but would greatly benefit from better connection and longer range. We can benefit from a sub-1 GHz service because the lower the frequency of a radio wave, the longer it can propagate, and the more it can pass through obstacles. The usable range, they've said, for this sub-1 GHz spectrum is around 1 kilometre, if there are no obstructions, obviously. Obstructions will heavily impact on that maximum distance, but it's still going to be way longer than what you're going to get with 2.4 even. The way the specification works, it supports at least 8,191 devices, and I believe even more if it's on the narrower megahertz bandwidth. Now, like I said, speed is not the priority here. It's not really going to be for streaming video or anything. It's more for devices that really don't need a lot of bandwidth, such as smart lights and things like that. It takes almost no bandwidth to be able to get the signal, turn on this colour, or something like that. And from what I've read, the speed on the narrowest 1 MHz channel could be anywhere from 150 kilobits per second, not much at all, up to 4 megabits per second, which is actually kind of decent if you're talking about 1 kilometre away. And that's going to depend on what modular coding scheme, or MCS, you're using. However, devices could combine multiple channels to use more than the 1 MHz width, and also, I believe, use up to 4 spatial streams for each channel. I'm not going to really get into all that, but basically it just means it can combine signals to theoretically get up to an 80 megabit speed as an absolute maximum. Although that would probably mean that there would have to be a lot less interference from any other devices for that to be the case. Another benefit is that the HaLow protocol would require much less power usage. It can allow devices to sleep and only send signals very infrequently, and apparently it would allow devices to run off a single button cell battery for months or even years. Now, this standard was actually published way back in 2017, but it's really taken until now to gain attention and start to actually become a thing. And that is partially because the Wi-Fi Alliance, who manage the Wi-Fi standards, actually created a certification program for Wi-Fi HaLow. So now it'll be a little bit more standardized. I'm definitely excited about this. Hopefully it's going to be rolled out on more devices and it won't fall by the wayside. Okay, the next development is the so-called WiFi EasyMesh specification and certification program. If you're not familiar, a Wi-Fi mesh network is not new. Been around for years and allows you to combine multiple Wi-Fi access points and allow a phone or device to see them as all the same thing. So it can swap between the closest access point or whichever has the best signal without the user having to manually go in and switch to an extender or device that has a different SSID. So it's a way more convenient way to set up a Wi-Fi network, though it is a little bit more expensive, and plenty of manufacturers have created their own Wi-Fi mesh routers and networks. The problem is that different mesh access points from different manufacturers don't usually work together. However, that certification program will change this going forward because if the manufacturers want to follow this standard, they'll have to make their products in a way that will actually make them compatible. So, if you buy a Netgear mesh network, for example, you should be able to go out and buy a Linksys access point to add on to it. This is good news for us because it means that we don't have to buy only the most expensive equipment to create our own mesh networks. And apparently, EasyMesh specification will also be backwards compatible with Wi-Fi 4, 5 and 6. So you could buy maybe a cheap router that only supports Wi-Fi 5 or 4, but it would still be able to become part of the mesh. I think this development is also really awesome. It's going to make mesh networks a lot more affordable and easier to expand. And now finally we can talk about Wi-Fi 7. Yes, you might not even have Wi-Fi 6 or 6E yet, But they're already working on Wi-Fi 7, and according to a webinar that was hosted by the CTO of wireless connectivity at Intel, he speculated that we could have Wi-Fi 7 within 3 years, which is a lot shorter than the usual 6 years between generations. Wi-Fi 7 would supposedly be possibly capable of speeds of around 5 times faster than Wi-Fi 6, meaning it could be around 46 gigabits per second max. This is achievable because it will be capable of something called multi-link operation, or MLO, which would basically allow devices to connect to multiple channels simultaneously. Now, I'm not talking about channel bonding, where you kind of combine channels to increase bandwidth, but a scenario where you could connect, for example, both a 5 and a 6 GHz device on completely different spectrums, which you can't do right now. Also, the Wi-Fi 7 specification would include that sub-1 GHz spectrum of WiFi HaLow, as well as the 6 to 7 GHz spectrum of Wi-Fi 6E. So it's a bit like the best of all worlds. Now, I mentioned connecting to multiple channels before, but this will also allow you to combine channels into bigger ones. So currently, the maximum channel width is 160 MHz. With Wi-Fi 7, apparently, you'd be able to go up to 320 MHz. And one interesting thing that's being worked on with Wi-Fi 7 is something called open roaming, an industry initiative where a lot of big companies like supermarkets Target and Walmart, whatever, are working on creating, effectively, a network of Wi-Fi that would be as accessible and seamless as cellular networks. It's not currently clear how this would work, but potentially you could sign up and pay for some kind of subscription. Then if you were in range of one of these hotspots, it would automatically connect you and maybe have faster speed or something like that. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, aren't public Wi-Fi hotspots not a good thing to connect to? And for the most part, yes. However, with Wi-Fi 7 and a specific feature, WPA3, which is the latest security protocol for Wi-Fi, there's an optional feature called Wi-Fi Enhanced Open, which basically fixes the old issues of connecting to a public Wi-Fi hotspot where, if one person connects, then the same encryption key is used for everyone that's connected so that one person can decrypt all the traffic from everyone else. Assuming they weren't using HTTPS or something, which most things now do. Wi-Fi Enhanced Open is an optional feature, but presumably any public Wi-Fi hotspot would be using it. Basically allows every single device that's connected to have a separate encryption key. So, no matter how many people are connected, they can't spy on other people's connections. So you can trust the Wi-Fi hotspot and not worry about everyone else connected to it, which is a big improvement, obviously. Who knows if that will actually pan out? It's just something to keep an eye on. So, some big features coming to Wi-Fi that you can expect relatively soon, probably in the next couple of years. I know I'm definitely excited. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up so the algorithm knows you liked it. And if you want to subscribe, also be sure to click the bell next to the subscribe button to get notifications. I only upload about twice a week tops, so you don't want those videos getting lost in the rest of your subscriptions. If you guys want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is one where I was talking about Wi-Fi 6E. If you don't know what that is, it's that new higher 6 and 7 GHz spectrum. Definitely want to know about that. You can click on that right there. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.